Welcome to the next episode of Two Guys Discussing Russia Over Pastries. Today the question is, does Putin control the siloviki or do they control him? And to address this question, we've invited Dmitri Gorenburg, who's affiliated with Harvard and CNA Corporation. So Dima, what do you think?
Well, I think that Putin controls the siloviki, and I've done some research at CNA on Russian decision-making, and what we found is that there's a group of, it's kind of a collegial group of leaders that has been in place since the start of the Putin regime, and Putin is sort of the balancer among them. So he's the one indispensable person in this group. And the others, sometimes, as we saw, a lot of the sort of modernizing economists have been kicked out. The siloviki themselves that have remained are not united. They have, there are a few patrons, and they each have their own interests, and they fight amongst themselves. And the one person that is necessary to keep them all in their place, so to speak, is Putin. And so he decides who gets how much of which slice of the pie, and whether Sechin is allowed to take over Bashneft, has been in the news recently, or not. And so he's the one who's really calling the shots.
Okay, so Sufian, do you think that that's correct?
Well, I would argue that during Yeltsin's time, we could argue that Yeltsin controlled siloviki, or he kept them away from power. But as soon as Putin came to power, he employed siloviki, he depended on him. And when we look at the methods that Putin employed during the Olympics, resolving issues not only with security, but even with migrant workers, when we see the invasion to Ukraine, to annexation of Crimea, Georgia, we can see that he is so dependent on siloviki, not only in maintaining his power, but also he listens to them, and he gives them a very big part of the Russian budget. And so I would argue that siloviki control him, and what we see now is happening in the logic of siloviki, not a civil ruler of Russia, or not civil leader of Russia.
Well, unfortunately, despite the excellent research that Dima and his colleagues are carrying out, we have no way of knowing what really goes on inside the Kremlin and the relationship between the president and the military, the police, and different power structures. So we're going to flip a coin. So heads or tails?
Tails.
Tails, that Putin does control the siloviki. And it's heads.
Heads. Siloviki control Putin.
Well,
sorry for that pessimistic scenario.
I don't know which one is better.
Yeah, it's hard to say. Well, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.